Morning, everybody. Welcome to the lending report for May 2nd, 2025. So yes, already into May, Mother's Day fast approaching. So I hope you have some nice plans for your moms or your wives as that day comes up. But anyways, interesting week. It was jobs week, always an important week in the mortgage industry. But we'll start with mortgage applications. Excuse me, activity down 4% for both purchases and refinances. Can't get a frog out of my throat. Jobless claims was very interesting. Those filing for the very first time up 18,000, and continuing claims up 83,000. That's we've seen some wild numbers here, but that's a really large number, and it leads into our job reports, which I'm going to give you here in a little bit, just because interesting to see those filing for unemployment, those numbers, and what we're seeing with the job reports. But more on that a little bit later. So PCE also came in this week. That is the Fed's favorite measure of inflation. That was for the month of March. Month over month, it was flat. So no change. The estimate was to be at 0.1%. So this wasn't earth shattering by any stretch of the imagination, but interesting that there was no positive or negative movement with the personal consumption expenditures, inflation, that is. GDP, the first read for 2025 first quarter came out. It was a negative 0.3%. Now, this was a big miss. The estimate, this is the first negative reading we have had since quarter one of 2022. So when we have a low GDP number, especially one negative, that shows the economy looks to be in retraction, people pulling back, consumers not spending as much, but still some contradictory information out there. So now we'll get into the jobs reports. Always starts with JOLTS. JOLTS showing the decline of job openings of 300,000. And the prior month of February was revised 100,000 lower. So what we're seeing is job creations per the JOLTS report not favorable. All right, then let's get into a couple of slides here that I have. ADP came out. It was also a miss. It was 62,000 versus 115,000. So much lower than expectations. So some positive reaction to that. And you can see that in job creations, the predominant driver of job creations was in medium-sized businesses, not large companies, not small companies. It was the medium-sized companies that were seeing most of that activity. And again, the top sectors being leisure and hospitality at 27,000, trade, transportation, and utilities at 21,000. There were losses in education and health services, but that could be a result of the DOGE cuts that we've been seeing. Then if you also look within this report for wages, you'll see that those who stayed at their jobs, the wages went from 4.6% to 4.5%. And then switchers, people looking for new employment, possibly with new higher income, that went from 6.9%, or was from 6.7% to 6.9%. So a tick up there. So maybe people are starting to get a little more proactive about searching for new employment and more income. Now, the head scratcher is today, the BLS report. This has been the case always with the BLS report. And this is not just a new administration thing. This is something that we've been talking about for over a year. Went back into the Biden era. The BLS report is just a massive head scratcher. It came in better than expectations, where we have heard nothing we've heard everything to the contrary with the other reports. BLS came in at 177,000 versus 130,000. But here's what I want you to take note of. Look at the revisions. So once the report is revised, it goes through 3 months of revisions. The following month, the month after that, and the month there. And you can see, if you look at these revisions, every time we've had a big BLS report, because that has been the case for a good solid 2 years here, there are revisions down the following month, and there are pretty substantial revisions down. You can see those revisions here on this chart. So this is something nobody talks about. So this is a head scratcher to me, because we continue this is a big driver of the market, especially the stock market. When the jobs report comes out, the BLS comes out, and it's much better than expectations, everybody thinks the economy's doing really well, that jobs are out there to be had, which I suppose they probably are, but it doesn't seem, based on the filings for unemployment, that people want those jobs that are being offered. So leisure and hospitality, nobody's interested in that, doesn't pay enough. So very interesting that this never gets talked about. These revisions get replaced every single month, and they're revised lower. So the report never truly as good as it seems. Within this report, we also get income and spending for March. We did show that personal spending was up 0.7% month over month. So again, people continuing to spend out there, even though we're showing the economy in contraction, inflation still a problem, the cost of everything's going up, tariffs being a potential impact. And we could see tariffs being a problem as it relates to inventory on shelves starting this month, because the tariff started in March, and we get a lot of our products from China, and it typically takes 60 days to get from China to the shelves in America. So if those tariffs started March, we're likely to see a few more bare shelves starting this month. We'll see. Personal income up 0.5%, so that's positive to see. But savings rate down to 3.9% from 4.1%. And if you look here at buy now, pay later, a lot of people using the buy now, pay later method of paying for things right now. Now, this is a small survey. It was done by London Tree. There were only 2,000 people. But right now, 50% of people using buy now, pay later to buy products. 41% of them late on those payments. And then also 25% of people using buy now to pay later for groceries. So they're basically using these buy now, pay later options to get through till their next paycheck comes through. Now, this is a small sample, but when you got 50% of even 2,000 people using this, how does that translate to the American population in general? That does not bode well for Americans, I don't think. And also, what we've seen and what is to come about this month are layoffs from about 130 different companies. So warn notices have been issued for several major companies. And what warn issues are, sorry, I can speak English, it's when companies plan to do mass layoffs or relocate or shut down their businesses, they have to give their employees 60 days of notices. So there's some major companies coming about in May that will have layoffs. Just to name a few: FedEx, UPS, Safeway, Wells Fargo, Compass, AT&T, Starbucks, and Chase. Man, I hope you people don't have problems getting your coffee in a timely fashion. Layoffs are coming. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the jobs reports in the following months. Inflation, how it plays out with lesser products on the shelves, how are companies going to, when the tariffs were announced, they didn't have a lot of time to implement anything that would cover their butts with rising costs. There just wasn't a lot of notice given. So will we see more inflationary cost as it relates to food and goods with these tariffs? Because it keeps going back and forth as what's going to happen with tariffs. We're implementing more, then we're pulling back. We're implementing more, then pulling back. So companies aren't able to react to this and build it into their pricing. And that's always what happens when it comes to tariffs. The consumers pay for it. The companies aren't going to take less profits. They're going to pass it on to their consumers by increasing costs. So again, head scratcher of a week. Let's go into the MBS charts. You can see that over the past 5 days, the 5 bars here, today we are definitely losing some ground. We had made up a little bit this week. We weren't like moving mountains earlier this week, but we had still made up ground over the last 2.5 weeks, basically. And today we're losing some ground based on this BLS report, which I don't know, the BLS report just seems to be a load of cockeye. you know, to use something, you know, not profane. But again, BLS Report has been a head scratcher for several years at this point. So that is what's going on right now. Love to hear your thoughts on what's going on out there. What do you think is happening? I appreciate you viewing and watching and liking my videos. If you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.